Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The morning reveille hadn't sounded for hours, but John Carter's internal clock had him awake at 0500 sharp. 20 years of military service had ingrained routines deeper than mere habit. They were the framework that held his world together. He stood at attention before his bedroom mirror, each movement precise as he adjusted his uniform. The familiar weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders with his medals and campaign ribbons. His fingers traced the Distinguished Service Cross, a reminder of the lives he'd saved in Kandahar when everything had gone sideways. The mission had taught him that evil rarely announced itself with gunfire and explosions. Sometimes it crept in slowly, wearing a familiar face, hiding behind routine until it was too late. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heating system and Victoria's steady breathing from their bed. John studied his wife's reflection in the mirror, the elegant curve of her shoulder, the carefully maintained honey blonde hair splayed across her pillow. Even in sleep, she looked posed, as if aware of an audience. When had that artificial perfection replaced the genuine warmth he'd fallen in love with? The floor creaked outside their bedroom. Emily's footsteps, hesitant and light. John could recognize each family member's tread, a skill that had kept his unit alive in urban combat, now serving to track the subtle rhythms of his home life. His daughter's footsteps had changed lately, becoming more tentative, like someone trying to move through a minefield that a soft knock drew his attention. "Come in, Emily," he called, pitching his voice low to avoid waking Victoria. The door hinges whispered as Emily slipped inside, her reflection appearing beside his in the mirror. At 16, she had Victoria's delicate features, but where her mother's beauty was a weapon, Emily's was still innocent, though lately, that innocence seemed to be fraying at the edges. "Dad!" Her voice barely carried across the room. "Do you have to go to the base today?" John turned, taking in the oversized sweater that seemed to swallow her slight frame, the way her fingers worried at the frayed cuffs. Emily had always been reserved, finding comfort in books and quiet corners, but this was different. This was fear wearing his daughter's face. "Just the morning briefing, sweetheart. I'll be home for dinner." He reached out slowly. He'd learned to telegraph his movements lately, as Emily had grown startlingly jumpy. His hand found her shoulder, feeling the slight tremor that ran through her at the contact before she leaned into his touch. Could you maybe pick me up from school today?" The tremor in her voice matched the one in her shoulders. "Of course. Is everything okay at school?" 20 years of military intelligence had taught John to read between the lines, to spot the questions people couldn't bring themselves to ask. That Emily's eyes darted to the floor, then to the bed where Victoria still lay sleeping. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just want to come home right after." The bed rustled as Victoria stirred, her voice carrying that precise note of maternal concern that never quite reached her eyes. "Emily, why are you up so early, dear?" John watched his daughter's transformation, the way her shoulders pulled back, her chin lifting in an unconscious mimicry of her mother's perfect posture. The change happened in seconds, like watching a soldier don combat armor. "I have a test first period," Emily said, her voice carefully modulated. "I wanted to review my notes." Victoria sat up, the morning light catching the silk of her negligee. "Always studying. You should be more concerned with making friends, dear. Academic excellence only gets you so far in life." Her smile held a sharp edge. "Just look at your father, all that discipline, all those medals, and what does he have to show for it?" "I have a daughter I'm proud of," John said quietly, watching Emily's posture soften slightly at his words. "And that's worth more than any medal." Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. "Of course you'd say that. Emily, go get ready for school. We need to work on your makeup today. You're not a child anymore, and it's time you started presenting yourself properly." Emily's retreat was almost soundless, but John caught the slight hitch in her breathing. He waited until the door closed before turning to Victoria. "She's 16. Let her be a kid while she can." "A kid?" Victoria stretched languorously, each movement calculated. "Wake up, John. The world doesn't reward innocence. The sooner she learns that, the better off she'll be." She rose from the bed, moving past him with practiced grace. Not everyone can hide behind a uniform and pretend the world is as simple as following orders. The words were familiar weapons, aimed with precision born of years of marriage. Once they might have drawn blood. Now John recognized them for what they were, covering fire, meant to distract from whatever Victoria was really hiding, that he finished dressing in silence, his mind already cycling through tactical assessments. Something was wrong in his home, something that had his daughter walking like she was crossing a battlefield. And if there was one thing John Carter knew, it was how to analyze a battlefield. Breakfast was a choreographed affair, with Victoria directing conversation like a general deploying troops. "Emily, dear, you really should join the committee for the spring formal. Mrs. Anderson specifically asked about you." Emily pushed her eggs around her plate. "I have a lot of studying to do." "Studies, studies, studies." Victoria sipped her coffee, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the ceramic. "You know, there's a new assistant coach for the tennis team. Marcus, you remember Marcus from the charity gala? He mentioned he'd be happy to give you private lessons." The fork in Emily's hand clattered against her plate. John didn't miss the way her face went pale, or how Victoria's smile sharpened at the reaction. I don't really like tennis," Emily managed. "Nonsense. Marcus is an excellent teacher. Very hands-on with his students." Victoria's eyes met John's over her coffee cup, something challenging in her gaze. "Not everyone believes in maintaining distance like your father does." John set his own cup down carefully, years of discipline keeping his hand steady. "I'll pick you up at 3, Emily. We can stop for ice cream if you'd like." The relief in Emily's eyes was like watching a drowning person spot a lifeline. "Yes, please. Ice cream?" Victoria's laugh held a note of contempt. "Really, John? She's not 5 anymore. Besides, she needs to watch her figure if she's going to attract the right kind of attention." "The right kind of attention?" John kept his voice level, but something in his tone made Victoria's smile falter slightly. "And what kind would that be?" The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken accusations, until Victoria stood with artificial brightness. "Come along, Emily. We don't want to be late. I'm heading to the club after I drop you off tennis lesson with Marcus." "Don't wait up, John." As they left, John remained at the table, his tactical mind processing 100 small details. Emily's fear, Victoria's pointed comments, the way his daughter seemed to be disappearing into herself. He'd learned in combat that the most dangerous threats weren't always the ones that announced themselves with gunfire. Sometimes they worked in silence, destroying their targets from within. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his recent photos until he found one from last year's father-daughter dance. Emily was smiling in the picture, her face bright with genuine joy as they stood together in their formal wear. He compared that image to the ghost who had sat at his breakfast table, and something cold settled in his stomach. His daughter was under attack. And John Carter had never been one to leave a soldier behind in hostile territory. The morning briefing at Fort Bradley dragged like a patrol through hostile territory. John's mind kept drifting to Emily's face at breakfast, cataloging the changes he'd observed over the past months. The growing shadows under her eyes, the way she'd stopped wearing the butterfly hair clips she'd loved, how she'd withdrawn from the drama club that had once been her sanctuary. "Colonel Carter?" Major Richard's voice cut through his thoughts. "Your assessment of the new security protocols?" John shifted smoothly into his professional role, years of compartmentalization taking over. "The protocols are solid, but we need to address the vulnerability in the communications relay. One weak link can compromise the entire system." The words felt heavy with double meaning. How many weak links had he missed in his own home? How many warnings had he failed to read? The briefing ended at 1,400 hours, giving him time to review personnel files before heading to Emily's school. He found himself studying the faces of his junior officers, remembering how many times he'd had to piece together the truth from what wasn't being said. Body language, subtle changes in behavior. The signs had always been there, if you knew how to read them. At precisely 1,455 hours, John pulled up outside Riverside High School. The familiar rhythm of teenagers flooding out of the building was disrupted by something that made his combat instincts flare. A sleek black Mercedes idling across the street, its driver watching the exodus with predatory focus. John's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he spotted Emily emerging from the building. She moved like someone crossing open ground under enemy observation, her shoulders hunched, books clutched to her chest like body armor. Her eyes darted to the black Mercedes, and John saw raw fear flash across her face before she hurried toward his car. The Mercedes driver turned his head, and John got his first clear look at Marcus. Expensive suit, carefully styled hair. The kind of smile that reminded John of arms dealers he'd encountered in war zones. All surface charm masking something rotten underneath. Emily practically dove into the passenger seat. "Can we go? Please?" Instead of answering, John watched Marcus's car glide past them, noting the license plate with military precision. "Emily, who was that man?" "No one," she whispered, but her trembling hands betrayed her. John drove in silence for several minutes, his mind running through scenarios, analyzing threats. He pulled into the parking lot of Annie's ice cream parlor, their old refuge from hard days, the place they'd celebrated every dance recital and good report card. "Talk to me, sweetheart," he said softly as he killed the engine. "Whatever it is, we can handle it together." Emily stared at her hands, tears gathering in her eyes. The silence stretched, broken only by the cheerful jingle of the ice cream parlor's door as customers came and went. John waited, giving her the space to find her voice, just as he'd waited out frightened civilians in combat zones. "His name is Marcus," she finally whispered, each word seeming to cost her something vital. He's Mom's friend." The way she said friend made John's stomach turn, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you mean, Mom's friend?" They're together." Emily's words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "She brought him to the house when you were deployed last month. She said I needed to learn how men really are, that your values were—" Her voice cracked. "She made me watch them sometimes, Dad. She said I needed to learn how to control men, how to be more like her." John's training kicked in, keeping his breathing steady even as rage built in his chest. "Tell me everything, Emily. Don't leave anything out." The story poured out of her how Marcus had started showing up at her school, making comments that made her skin crawl. How Victoria had laughed when Emily told her she was scared of him. The way her mother had started critiquing her clothes, her manner, pushing her to be more appealing. Mom said I was being ridiculous, that I should be flattered by the attention. Emily's voice had gone distant, disconnected. She said maybe if you weren't so boring, so stuck on your precious honor, she wouldn't need Marcus. Through the ice cream parlor's window, John could see families enjoying their treats, children laughing, parents smiling. The normalcy of it seemed obscene against Emily's revelations. Victoria hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She had actively participated in terrorizing their daughter, trying to corrupt the innocent soul John had sworn to protect. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked gently, though he already knew the answer. "Mom said you wouldn't understand, that you'd just make things worse." Emily's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. She said no one would believe me anyway, because she's so respected in the community. The other moms all love her, and Marcus, he donates to the school, coaches tennis. Everyone thinks he's so charming. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have been stronger." "No, Emily. None of this is your fault. None of it." John pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her tears soak through his uniform shirt. The military discipline that had shaped his life warred with the rage, building inside him rage at Victoria's betrayal, at Marcus's predatory behavior, at the thought of his daughter suffering in silence. That as he held her, his mind was already shifting into combat mode, analyzing vectors of attack, identifying vulnerabilities. Victoria and Marcus had declared war on his daughter's innocence, using psychological warfare to break down her defenses. But they'd made a critical error. They'd assumed John's military discipline made him predictable, manageable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Emily," he said softly, "I need you to tell me one more thing. Has Marcus ever—" "No," she said quickly. "He just makes comments, stands too close. Mom says I'm imagining things, that I'm being a prude, but—" She shuddered. "The way he watches me, Dad, like he's waiting for something." John's jaw tightened. He'd seen that look before in war zones where predators targeted the vulnerable. He'd put down those threats with extreme prejudice. This situation would require more subtlety, but the end result would be the same. "We're going home," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had guided troops through combat zones. "Pack a bag. We're not staying there tonight." "But Mom, your mother made her choice." The words came out clipped, final. She chose to align herself with a predator, to use her own daughter as bait. The last word tasted like ashes in his mouth. That's not happening anymore. As they drove home, John's mind was already gaming out scenarios, analyzing angles of attack. Victoria had spent years building her social fortress, cultivating an image of the perfect mother, the community leader. Marcus had positioned himself as the charming benefactor, the helpful coach. They constructed their hunting blind carefully, using respectability as camouflage, but John Carter hadn't earned his medals by respecting camouflage. He'd earned them by seeing through it, by identifying threats and neutralizing them with surgical precision. Victoria thought his military background made him rigid, predictable. Marcus saw him as an obstacle to be managed. Neither of them understood what they were dealing with. But they were about to learn. Victoria was waiting in the living room when they arrived home, scrolling through her phone with practiced nonchalance. The house smelled of her expensive perfume, the same scent that had once filled John's dreams during deployments, now cloying and artificial in his nostrils. She looked up with an artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, isn't this cozy? Father-daughter bonding time?" John felt Emily tense beside him. "Go to your room," he said quietly. "Pack what you need for a few days." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Excuse me? And where exactly do you think you're taking my daughter?" "Emily, go upstairs and pack," John repeated, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded troops in combat zones. He waited until Emily's footsteps faded before turning back to his wife. "We need to talk about Marcus." Victoria's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Oh, and what about Marcus?" "He's been harassing our daughter. And you've been encouraging it." "Harassing?" Victoria set her phone down with deliberate care, her manicured nails clicking against the glass coffee table. "Please, I'm teaching her valuable life lessons, something you clearly can't do with all your rigid morality and outdated values." "Life lessons?" John's voice was deadly quiet. "You forced our 16-year-old daughter to watch you with your lover. You've been helping him terrorize her." Victoria stood, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she approached him. Her perfume filled the air between them, no longer the scent of home, but something poisonous, corrupting. "You really don't get it, do you? Your precious military discipline, your obsession with honor, it's pathetic. Emily needs to learn how the real world works. Marcus is helping me show her that. By stalking her at school? By making her afraid to walk down the hallways?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic." Victoria's smile turned cruel, an expression John had seen before on the faces of enemies who thought they held all the cards. "Marcus appreciates youth and beauty, unlike some people. He understands that a girl Emily's age needs guidance, needs to learn how to use what she has." The rage in John's chest crystallized into something cold and purposeful. "You're talking about our daughter. I'm talking about reality, John. Face it. You're too boring to keep my attention, too wrapped up in your precious duty to understand what a woman really needs. At least Marcus knows how to make things exciting." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "And he's very interested in Emily's development." John felt something shift inside him, like the final tumbler falling into place in a lock. The woman before him wasn't his wife of 17 years, wasn't the mother of his child. She was an enemy combatant who had infiltrated his home, who had been systematically attacking his daughter's soul. "This ends now," he said, his voice carrying the same authority that had commanded troops under fire. "You will tell Marcus to stay away from Emily? Or what?" Victoria cut him off with a mocking laugh. "You'll report him? Report me? Who do you think they'll believe? The dedicated military man who's barely home, or the loving mother who's active in every school committee?" She stepped closer, her smile sharpening. "Face it, John, you can't protect her from the real world forever. Sooner or later, she'll learn that my way is the only way that matters." In that moment, John saw Victoria clearly for the first time, not as his wife, not as Emily's mother, but as a predator who had been hiding in plain sight. His military training kicked in, analyzing the threat and calculating the best strategy for neutralizing it. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "I can't protect her from the real world, but I can protect her from you." "Is that a threat, Colonel?" Victoria's voice dripped with mockery. "No, it's a promise." John turned and headed for the stairs, Victoria's laughter following him like poison. "Go ahead, play the hero. But remember, Emily's growing up, and sooner or later, she'll learn that the world works my way, not yours." John paused at the foot of the stairs, looking back at the woman he had once loved. "No, Victoria, she won't. Because unlike you, our daughter has something you'll never understand, a soul." Upstairs, he found Emily sitting on her bed, her small suitcase already packed. She looked up at him with eyes too old for her face, searching for reassurance. "Dad, we're going to stay at the base guest quarters tonight," he said gently. "Pack anything else you need." "But Mom, your mother won't be a problem anymore." John sat beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "I promise you, Emily, no one is going to hurt you again. Not Marcus, not your mother, no one." As Emily gathered her remaining belongings, John could hear Victoria on the phone downstairs, her voice raised in anger. He knew she was probably calling Marcus, planning their next move. Let them plot. Let them scheme. They had no idea what a father trained in military strategy was capable of when protecting his child. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made Emily freeze. Through the window, John saw the sleek black Mercedes Marcus, summoned by Victoria like a loyal attack dog. Emily's face went pale. "Dad, he's here." "Get your bag," John said calmly, his combat instincts fully engaged now. "We're leaving through the back door." As they descended the back stairs, John could hear Victoria's voice from the front of the house, greeting Marcus with honeyed tones that now seemed as false as everything else about her. Emily's hand found his, squeezing tight. As they slipped out through the kitchen door, John helped Emily into his car, parked in the back alley where he'd started leaving it after first noticing the changes in his daughter. As they pulled away, he caught a glimpse of Marcus in his rearview mirror, the man's predatory face twisted with frustration as he realized his prey was escaping. Let them fume. Let them rage. John Carter had never lost a battle when the stakes really mattered. And he wasn't about to start now, not when his daughter's soul hung in the balance. Victoria and Marcus had made a fatal mistake. They had threatened someone under his protection. Now they would learn why John Carter's enemies had learned to fear his precision, his patience, and his absolute dedication to destroying those who crossed the lines he held sacred. As they drove through the gathering darkness toward the military base, John glanced at Emily's sleeping form in the passenger seat. The rage inside him had transformed into something cold and purposeful. Victoria thought his military discipline made him boring. She was about to learn that it made him lethal when he had a righteous cause. And there was no cause more righteous than saving his daughter from the predators who had dared to target her. The base guest quarters felt sterile after the poisoned comfort of home, but John preferred honest emptiness to false warmth. He watched Emily sleep on the narrow bed, her face finally peaceful after crying herself into exhaustion. The digital clock on the nightstand read 0200 hours. Time to begin the operation. John opened his laptop, the screen's blue glow casting shadows across the room. 20 years of military service had taught him that information was the key to victory. Victoria and Marcus had been running their operation like guerrilla fighters, using social camouflage to mask their movements. Time to strip that camouflage away. Then a knock at his door made him reach instinctively for his sidearm before remembering where he was. "Enter." Major Tom Riley stepped in, closing the door quietly behind him. The base's head of intelligence operations looked as alert as ever, despite the hour. "Got your message, Colonel. Situation that's serious?" "Worse." John gestured to the chair across from him. "I need everything you can find on a Marcus drives a black Mercedes, coaches tennis at Riverside High, moves in the country club circuit." Riley's eyebrows rose. "Official channels?" "Unofficial. This is personal. The kind of personal that needs to stay quiet, or the kind that's going to make noise." John's jaw tightened. "The kind that involves my daughter?" Riley's expression hardened. He had 2 teenagers of his own. "Give me 4 hours." I'll wake up some contacts who owe me favors. Tom. John's voice stopped him at the door. This stays between us. Of course it does. That's what brothers in arms are for. Riley paused. John, how bad? Bad enough that I'm calling in favors at 0200. Riley nodded grimly. I'll start with his financials. Money always leaves traces. As the door closed, John's phone buzzed Victoria. He let it go to voicemail, then played the message on low volume. Really, John? Running away to your precious base? Marcus is furious. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Call me back immediately, or I'll file a police report for kidnapping. You can explain to your commanding officer why you're using military property for your domestic drama. A second message followed. Emily, sweetie, your father is being ridiculous. Come home now, and we can forget this whole thing. Marcus was asking about you. He's worried. He says you left your tennis racket in his car last week. Why didn't you tell me you were taking private lessons? We can talk about it when you get home. John's hand tightened on the phone. The casual mention of Emily being in Marcus's car made his combat instincts flare. Victoria was laying a paper trail, establishing a narrative of innocent contact. She'd learned psychological warfare well during their marriage that a soft sound made him turn. Emily stood in the bedroom doorway, arms wrapped around herself. I was never in his car, Dad. I swear. I know, sweetheart. Come here. He held out his arm, and she curled against his side like she had when she was small. Your mother is trying to establish a false narrative. Standard tactical procedure when preparing for engagement. What do you mean? She's creating a story that makes Marcus look innocent and me look unstable. If anyone investigates, she'll have texts, voicemails, witnesses at the club who'll say they saw you two together. She's building her defensive position. Emily's voice was small. She's really good at making people believe her version of things. That's because she's had practice. But she's never gone up against someone trained to spot manipulation. John squeezed her shoulder. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow, we start gathering intelligence. What kind of intelligence? Everything. Marcus's background, his finances, his pattern of movement. In combat, you study your enemy until you know them better than they know themselves. Then you find their weak points. And Mom? John's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother made her choice, Emily. She chose to align herself with a predator, to use her own daughter as bait. That makes her an enemy combatant. Will you? Emily hesitated. Will you ever forgive her? No. The word was flat, final. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. Some betrayals don't get forgiveness. His phone buzzed again, a text from Riley. Got something. Marcus Vaughn. Multiple names, multiple states. Pattern emerging. Meet me in the secure briefing room at 0700. Dad. Emily's voice was stronger now. I want to help. I want to fight back. John studied his daughter's face, seeing past the fear to the steel underneath. It'll be dangerous. Victoria and Marcus will try to discredit you, to make you doubt yourself. They've been doing that for months. Emily's jaw set in a way that reminded John of himself. I'm tired of being afraid. All right. John nodded slowly. First rule of combat. Know your enemy. Tomorrow, you tell me everything. Every interaction, every comment, every time they tried to manipulate you. We're building a pattern of behavior. Like gathering intel. Exactly. You're our primary intelligence source. Your mother and Marcus think they've broken you down, made you weak. That's their first mistake. Emily's smile was small but real, the first he'd seen in weeks. What's their second mistake? Thinking my military background makes me predictable. They're about to learn that discipline isn't the same as weakness. John checked his watch. 3 hours until briefing. Get some rest, soldier. Tomorrow, we start the counteroffensive. As Emily returned to bed, John turned back to his laptop. Victoria's voicemails played in his mind, each word revealing more than she intended. She thought she was the master manipulator, that her social maneuvering made her untouchable. She'd forgotten that before he was her husband, John Carter was a tactical specialist who'd spent 2 decades learning to dismantle enemy operations. His phone buzzed with another message from Riley. Found connection to 3 private schools in different states. All resigned under unclear circumstances. Pattern of complaints hushed up. Keep digging. John's reply was immediate. Everything. Leave no stone unturned. The night deepened around the base, but John Carter didn't sleep. He'd entered combat mode, his mind processing information with military precision. Victoria and Marcus had declared war on his daughter's soul, using psychological warfare to break down her defenses. Now they would learn what happened when they brought their predatory games to a real warrior's battlefield. Dawn was still hours away, but the counteroffensive had already begun. The secure briefing room felt like a war chamber at 0700 hours. Maps and documents spread across the table as Major Riley laid out his findings. Emily sat beside John, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot chocolate, looking small but determined in one of his spare military sweatshirts. Marcus Vaughn, Riley began, tapping his tablet. Currently known as Marcus Vale in our community, but he's had at least 3 other names in the past decade. He moves through wealthy communities like a virus, always following the same pattern. Tell me, John said, watching Emily's knuckles whiten around her cup. Tennis coach, private instructor, generous donor to schools and youth programs. Gets close to wealthy families through their kids, especially targeting those with... Riley glanced at Emily apologetically. Those with vulnerable daughters and distracted parents. Show me the pattern, John demanded. Riley pulled up documents on the wall screen. Started in Connecticut under the name Marcus Vincent. Prestigious private school, lots of private lessons with teenage girls. Complaints started surfacing about inappropriate behavior, but money changed hands. Records were sealed. He disappeared before anything formal was filed. And then showed up in Pennsylvania 2 years later as Marcus Vale. Same pattern, tennis instructor, private lessons, donations to school programs. 3 families tried to press charges, but he had dirt on the parents. Messy divorces, affairs, financial irregularities. Everything got buried. Emily's voice was barely audible. He takes pictures. At the club. At school events. Mom says he's just being supportive, documenting memories. John's jaw tightened. Gathering ammunition. Smart predator, Riley agreed grimly. Creates social capital, builds relationships with influential parents, collects compromising information as insurance. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, he's too entrenched to touch. Until now, John's voice was steel. What's his current position? Tennis director at the country club, assistant coach at Riverside High, board member of 3 youth charities. Riley's disgust was evident. He's got photos with half the power players in town. Politicians, judges, business leaders all smiling with a generous philanthropist who's so dedicated to helping kids. Help me understand something, Tom. John leaned forward. How does a predator with this kind of pattern stay ahead of law enforcement? That's where it gets interesting. Riley pulled up financial records. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and a very interesting connection to a private investigation firm. He doesn't just gather dirt casually. He's professional about it. In Victoria, John kept his voice neutral for Emily's sake. What's her connection to his operation? Riley's expression darkened. Your wife's been making large deposits into an offshore account for the past 6 months. Account belongs to one of Marcus's shells. She's not just involved. She's financing him. Emily's cup clattered against the table. Mom's paying him? Why? Power, John answered quietly. Your mother craves it, doesn't she? The way people at the club defer to her, the influence she has in the community. Emily nodded slowly. She always talks about knowing everyone's secrets, about how that makes her untouchable. Marcus offers her something beyond an affair, Riley concluded. He's made her part of his operation. She identifies targets, helps him establish cover, probably helps gather compromising information. She's a spotter, John said grimly. In combat, a sniper works with a spotter who identifies targets and guides them in. Your mother's been playing that role for him. A knock at the door made them all tense. Lieutenant Parker stepped in, looking uncomfortable. Colonel Carter? There's someone at the main gate asking for you. Says his name is Marcus Vale. John felt Emily stiffen beside him. Stay here with Major Riley, he said softly. This is just a reconnaissance probe. He's testing our defenses. Dad, trust your commanding officer, soldier. He managed a small smile. That's an order. The drive to the main gate gave John time to settle into combat mode, analyzing angles of attack and defense. Marcus's Mercedes gleamed in the morning sun, its owner leaning against it with calculated casualness. Colonel Carter. Marcus straightened as John approached, offering his hand with a practiced smile. I hope you'll forgive the early visit, but I'm concerned about Emily. Victoria's worried sick. John ignored the offered hand. You're bold, coming onto a military base. Now, Colonel, there's no need for hostility. Marcus spread his hands, the picture of reasonable concern. I know Emily's been having some emotional difficulties lately. Teenagers often struggle with change, with understanding adult relationships. Victoria's told me how protective you are of your daughter. Has she? John's voice could have frozen hell. What else has my wife told you about my daughter? Look, I understand this is awkward. Marcus's smile never wavered. Finding out about Victoria and me, it must be difficult. But dragging Emily into our adult issues isn't healthy. Victoria says she's been acting out, making up stories. Interesting choice of words. John stepped closer, noting how Marcus's casual pose stiffened slightly. Acting out, making up stories. That's the narrative you usually establish, isn't it? Before you move on to your next hunting ground? The smile flickered. I'm not sure what you're implying, Colonel, but Marcus Vincent. Marcus Vale. How many names do you hide behind while you stalk teenage girls? John watched the blood drain from Marcus's face. How many families have you destroyed? How many lives have you poisoned? You're making a mistake. Marcus's voice hardened. I have friends in this community, influence. One phone call, and your command will hear all about how you're having a mental breakdown, using military resources for personal vendettas. Make your calls. John stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a combat whisper. But understand something. This isn't a game anymore. You're not dealing with distracted parents or vulnerable children. You're facing a warrior who's spent his life learning to destroy threats to those under his protection. Is that a threat, Colonel? No. It's a promise. Stay away from my daughter. Stay away from her school. If I see you within 100 yards of her, what happens next will make your previous hasty departures look like vacation planning. Marcus's smile turned ugly. Victoria warned me you were rigid, Colonel. Said you couldn't handle the real world, could only see things in black and white. But this isn't your precious military. Out here, everything's gray. That's where you're wrong. John turned to leave, then paused. There's nothing gray about predators targeting children. And there's nothing gray about what happens to those predators when they're finally caught. You've got nothing on me, Marcus called after him. No proof, no witnesses. Just the word of an unstable teenager and her overprotective father. John looked back, letting Marcus see the full weight of his combat experience in his eyes. You think I came to this meeting to make accusations? I came to give you a warning, one predator to another. The difference is I hunt armed enemies in combat zones. You hunt children in schools. He left Marcus standing by his expensive car, already pulling out his phone. Let him make his calls. Let him activate his network of compromised allies. John Carter had faced worse odds in actual war zones back in the briefing room. Emily looked up anxiously. What happened? Marcus just made his first tactical error, John said, watching Riley pull up more files on the screen. He came onto my territory, thinking he could intimidate me with social threats. Did it work? No, sweetheart. It told me exactly what kind of enemy we're dealing with, the kind that mistakes social power for real strength. John turned to Riley. Keep digging. Focus on the private investigation firm. If he's been gathering dirt on the community's power players, that's where we'll find his insurance files. And Mom? Emily's voice was stronger now. What about her part in this? Your mother made her choice. John's voice was final. She chose to be his spotter, to help him target vulnerable kids. Now she'll face the consequences of that choice. As Riley began outlining their next moves, John's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Marcus told me about your ridiculous threats. You're embarrassing yourself, John. Come home, apologize, and we can discuss this like adults. John deleted the message without responding. Victoria still thought she was dealing with her predictable military husband, the man whose rigid honor she'd mocked for years. She was about to learn that honor and weakness weren't the same thing in Marcus. He was about to learn why predators in nature fear the sound of war drums. The school board meeting room buzzed with tension as John took his seat in the back row. He'd chosen his position carefully. Clear sight lines to all exits, full view of the room, back against the wall. Combat habits died hard, and today they might prove useful. Victoria sat in the front row, perfectly coiffed in an expensive suit that practically screamed, "Concerned mother." She was surrounded by her usual coterie of social allies, their designer handbags and carefully arranged expressions matching hers. Marcus sat 2 rows behind her, his usual smirk firmly in place. "You sure about this?" Major Riley murmured from the seat beside John. "Going public is risky. They're expecting me to stay quiet, to play by their rules." John watched Victoria lean over to whisper something to the board president, noting how the woman nodded sympathetically. Time to change the battlefield. The meeting began with routine business, but John could feel the tension building. Victoria kept glancing back at Marcus, their silent communication obvious to anyone trained to spot it. Finally, the board president cleared her throat. "We have an unusual situation to address. Mrs. Carter has raised some concerns about inappropriate behavior involving her daughter Emily." Victoria stood, every movement calculated for maximum effect. "Thank you, Margaret. This is difficult for me." She dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "As many of you know, my husband John has been under tremendous stress lately. His military background sometimes makes it hard for him to adapt to civilian life." Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the room. John remained still, watching the performance with tactical precision. 2 days ago, he took our daughter from our home, using his military position to hide her on base. He's been making wild accusations about Marcus Vale, one of our most dedicated community members. Victoria's voice trembled perfectly. "I'm worried about his mental state. He's always been rigid, seeing threats where none exist. If I may." Marcus stood, his expression a masterpiece of concerned dignity. "I've tried to help Emily adjust to the changes in her family. As her tennis coach, I've seen how difficult this situation has been for her. But Colonel Carter seems to have convinced her that my efforts to mentor her were somehow inappropriate." John felt the room's sympathy shifting, exactly as Victoria and Marcus had planned. "Time to spring the trap. I'd like to present some evidence." John's voice cut through the murmurs as he stood. "Major Riley?" Riley stepped forward, distributing folders to each board member. Financial records showing regular payments from Victoria Carter to offshore accounts controlled by Marcus Vale, also known as Marcus Vincent, Marcus Prescott, and 3 other aliases. Documentation of similar patterns at 3 private schools in different states, all ending in sealed complaints and hasty resignations. The board president's face went pale as she opened her folder. "What is this?" "Evidence that Marcus Vale is a professional predator who targets vulnerable teenagers through school sports programs." John's voice carried the authority of command. "He establishes himself in wealthy communities, builds social connections, and gathers compromising information on influential people to protect himself." "This is ridiculous." Marcus stood, but John noticed the sweat beading on his forehead. "These are obviously fabricated. The offshore accounts are verified by federal banking records." Riley cut in. "The sealed complaints were accessed through official channels. Mr. Vale has been running this operation for years, aided by collaborators who help him identify and isolate targets." Victoria's perfectly controlled facade cracked. "You have no right to bring your paranoid delusions. Tell them about the photos, Victoria." John's voice was deadly quiet. "Tell them how you helped Marcus collect compromising information on their families. Tell them how you forced our daughter to watch your encounters with him, telling her she needed to learn how to control men." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Victoria spun to face Marcus, her eyes wide with panic. "You said those files were secure. You promised me." "Mrs. Carter," the board president's voice shook. "Are you admitting to helping Mr. Vale gather compromising information about families in our community?" Victoria's mask shattered completely. "You don't understand. Marcus showed me how power really works, how to make people do what you want. All your precious reputations, your social standing, it's all built on lies. We just found a way to use those lies. That's enough." Marcus grabbed his briefcase, heading for the door. This meeting is over. Sit down, Mr. Vale. A man in a suit stood from the back row, holding up a badge. FBI Special Agent Phillips. We're very interested in those offshore accounts Major Riley mentioned, and in your collection of compromising information about minors. The chaos that erupted was precisely what John had planned for. As federal agents emerged from their carefully positioned seats around the room, he watched Victoria's social world implode. Her carefully cultivated allies recoiled from her, their shocked expressions shifting from sympathy to disgust. How dare you? Victoria stormed up to John, her face contorted with rage. You self-righteous bastard. You've ruined everything. No, Victoria. You did that yourself when you chose to help a predator target our daughter. I was teaching her reality, your precious military honor, your rigid morality, they're worthless in the real world. Marcus showed me how to have real power. John looked at his wife, former wife, with cold clarity. The difference between us, Victoria, is that you mistake cruelty for strength. You think gathering dirt on people makes you powerful. I've faced real enemies, fought real battles. What you and Marcus do, it's not power. It's just sophisticated cowardice. Colonel Carter, Agent Phillips approached as other agents led a handcuffed Marcus from the room. We'll need a formal statement from Emily. She's ready. John watched Victoria being read her rights, her expensive suit clashing with the handcuffs. She's stronger than they knew, stronger than they wanted her to be. As the federal agents took control of the scene, John's phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Did it work? It worked, he typed back. Your mother and Marcus walked right into the trap. Federal agents are taking them into custody. Are you okay? John looked at Victoria as she was led away, still spitting threats and accusations. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was gone if she'd ever really existed at all. I'm fine, he replied. The enemy has been neutralized. Riley appeared at his shoulder as the room slowly emptied, shell-shocked board members huddling in disturbed groups. Hell of an operation, John. Using their own intelligence-gathering habits against them. They thought gathering dirt on people made them invincible. John's voice was grim. They forgot that real warriors know the difference between intelligence and ammunition. You don't just collect information. You use it tactically. Victoria didn't expect you to fight back like this. No. She thought my military background made me predictable. She never understood that discipline isn't weakness. It's precision. John straightened his uniform. Let's go. Emily's waiting. As they left the devastated battlefield of the boardroom, John felt no satisfaction, no triumph. He'd won the engagement, neutralized the threats to his daughter. But the war had left scars that would take time to heal. His phone buzzed again. Emily had sent a photo of herself in his spare military sweatshirt, smiling tentatively at the camera. The sight made something in his chest loosen slightly. They'd survived the battle, and they'd survived the aftermath. Victoria and Marcus had thought themselves tactical geniuses, playing their social chess game with people's lives. They'd never understood that they were facing a real warrior, someone who'd learned strategy in combat zones where the stakes were life and death, but they'd chosen to become predators, targeting the innocent, corrupting the vulnerable. Now they would learn that every predator eventually meets something higher up the food chain, and John Carter had spent his entire military career being that something. The federal holding facility's interview room felt colder than the evening air outside. John sat across from Victoria, studying the woman who'd once been his wife. Her designer outfit looked wilted now, her perfect makeup smudged from angry tears. But her eyes still burned with the same manipulative fire. Come to gloat. Victoria's voice dripped venom. The righteous military man, destroying his family in the name of honor. I came to give you one chance, John replied evenly. Tell the federal agents everything about Marcus's operation. Every family he targeted, every piece of information you helped him gather. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Or what? You've already taken everything. My reputation, my social standing, my freedom. I'm not here to negotiate. John leaned forward. I'm here because Emily asked me to give you a chance to do one decent thing before this ends. Emily? Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. She asked you to come? She still remembers the mother you used to be, before Marcus, before you chose power over your own daughter. I was teaching her strength. Victoria's fist slammed the table. You kept her weak, sheltered from reality. Marcus showed me how the world really works, how to take what you want, how to make others bend to your will. And that's why you'll never see her again. John stood, his voice cold. You mistake cruelty for strength, manipulation for power. You helped a predator target children, Victoria. Your own daughter. Marcus is twice the man you are. He understands that morality is for the weak. Victoria's rant cut off as an FBI agent entered the room. Mrs. Carter, we've finished processing the files from Mr. Vale's private investigator. Would you like to explain the photos we found on your personal laptop? The blood drained from Victoria's face. Those were encrypted. Your encryption was weak, John said quietly. Like everything else you thought made you strong. He left Victoria with the federal agents, her composure finally cracking as they laid out the evidence. In the hallway, Major Riley waited with a grim expression. Marcus made bail, Riley reported. His lawyers are good. Of course they are. He's been blackmailing half the legal community. John checked his phone. No messages from Emily. Status of the surveillance team? In position. If he tries anything, he will. John's voice was certain. Predators like Marcus can't stand to lose control of their targets, especially not when they're exposed. John, Riley's voice dropped. The FBI found something else in those files. Photos of Emily at school, at the mall, timestamps from last week. He's been stalking her even after you moved her to base. The rage that filled John's chest was Arctic cold. He's testing our defenses. Sending a message. Base security's been upgraded. Emily's safe. No. John's combat instincts were screaming now. This is his pattern. When exposure's imminent, he escalates. Makes one last grab for control before disappearing to start over somewhere else. His phone rang the base security office. Colonel Carter? Sir, there's been a breach at the south perimeter. And your daughter's not in her quarters. The world narrowed to tactical clarity. Sound the alarm. Full lockdown. I want every camera feed from the last hour. Already done, sir. We found this note in her room. The guard's voice was tight. It's from your wife. John's hands clenched. What does it say? Emily, Marcus, and I can help you understand why your father's rigid morality is a lie. Come to the old warehouse by the river. Time to grow up and learn how the real world works. Victoria's still in federal custody, Riley said sharply. But Emily doesn't know that. John was already moving. Marcus used Victoria's phone, probably from data he gathered during their affair. He's drawing Emily out, using her confusion about her mother against her. Riley fell in a step beside him. The warehouse district's full of abandoned buildings. Perfect territory for an ambush. No. John's voice was steel. Perfect territory for a counter-ambush. Call Agent Phillips. Tell him to hold Victoria in interrogation another hour. I don't want her warning Marcus. You're going to confront him alone. He's expecting the FBI, expecting a tactical team. He's not expecting a father trained in close-quarters combat. John checked his phone's GPS. Emily's smart. She'll have left us a trail. How can you be sure? Because I taught her emergency protocols. If she's ever under duress, make it look like she's complying while leaving markers only I would recognize. They reached John's car just as his phone buzzed a text from Emily's phone. Dad, Mom's right. I'm tired of hiding. Meeting them at the warehouse. Good girl, John murmured, showing Riley the screen. Look at the punctuation. Riley frowned. 2 periods instead of 3 in the ellipsis. Emily's signal. Means she's under observation, but thinking tactically. She'll have sent the same text to base security, making it look like teenage rebellion while alerting us to her situation. Like father, like daughter. Riley managed a grim smile. What's the play? Marcus thinks he's hunting my daughter. John's voice was deadly quiet. Time to teach him the difference between a predator and a warrior. Call your tactical team. Have them set up a perimeter, but stay dark. This ends tonight. As they drove toward the warehouse district, John's mind shifted fully into combat mode. Marcus had spent years perfecting his predatory pattern, using social manipulation and blackmail to target the vulnerable. He thought that made him a tactical genius, but he'd never faced a real tactical operative. Never gone up against someone trained to dismantle enemy operations in actual war zones. Most importantly, he'd never confronted a father whose military expertise was now completely focused on one mission: protecting his daughter. John's phone buzzed with another text from Emily's phone. Getting close. Can't wait to learn the truth about power. 3 periods this time. Emily was signaling that Marcus was close enough to see her phone screen. Good girl, maintaining her cover while gathering intelligence. She's buying us time, John told Riley. Making Marcus think his manipulation is working while leading him exactly where we want him. The student becomes the master. No. John's voice was granite. She's becoming a survivor. Marcus and Victoria wanted to teach her to be a predator. Instead, they taught her to be a warrior. The warehouse district loomed ahead, abandoned buildings casting long shadows in the setting sun. Somewhere in that urban jungle, a predator thought he was closing in on his prey. He was about to learn that some prey bites back, and that nothing in his years of manipulating civilians had prepared him to face a combat-trained father fighting for his child. The hunt was on. But this time, Marcus wasn't the hunter, that he was the target. The warehouse district spread before John like an urban battlefield, a maze of abandoned buildings and twisted metal casting long shadows in the fading light. Every combat instinct he'd honed over 20 years of service screamed that this was perfect ambush territory. But this time, the hunter was about to become the hunted. Teams in position, Riley's voice crackled through his earpiece. We got eyes on all exits. Stay dark, John ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus is expecting law enforcement. Standard tactics. He's not expecting someone who speaks his language of predator and prey. Movement in the east building, another voice reported. 3rd floor. 2 figures. John's hand tightened on his tactical flashlight. Emily? Confirmed. She's with an adult male. They're moving toward the center of the building. Through his night vision scope, John could see them, his daughter's slight frame and Marcus's larger silhouette outlined against the broken windows. Emily's movements were careful, measured, just as he'd taught her in their emergency drills. She was buying time, playing the confused teenager while leading Marcus exactly where they wanted him. You sure about this plan? Riley's voice held concern. Letting her play bait. She's not bait. John cut him off. She's a soldier executing a tactical maneuver. Marcus thinks he's hurting a scared kid. He's about to learn the difference between prey and a warrior in training. His earpiece crackled again. Emily's voice, pitched perfectly to sound uncertain. I don't understand, Marcus. Where's my mom? You said she'd be here. She's on her way, sweetheart. Marcus's voice oozed false concern. Your father's filled your head with lies about us, Victoria, and I just want to help you understand how the real world works. By kidnapping me? A tremor entered Emily's voice. By forcing me to come here? Force? Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the empty building. You came willingly, didn't you? Just like you've been coming to our private tennis lessons. Your mother's been so pleased with your progress. John's jaw clenched at the implication in Marcus's tone. Through his scope, he could see Emily's hands shake, but her feet were planted in the exact position they'd practiced, drawing Marcus further into the kill zone. There were never any tennis lessons, Emily said, her voice stronger now. Mom lied about that, didn't she? Just like she lied about everything else. Clever girl. Marcus's tone shifted, dropping the concerned mentor act. You're sharper than Victoria gives you credit for. She thinks you're weak like your father, all hung up on morality and rules. But I see something else in you, something that could be shaped into what? Another predator like you? Marcus's laugh echoed again. Predator? Such a harsh word. I prefer to think of myself as a teacher, someone who shows privileged little girls like you how power really works. By stalking them? Taking pictures? Blackmailing their families? You've been talking to Daddy's FBI friends, haven't you? Marcus stepped closer to Emily, his posture shifting from mentor to hunter. Did they tell you everything they found in my files? All the dirty little secrets I've collected? Your mother was very helpful with that. She has quite a talent for gathering ammunition. Emily backed up exactly 3 steps the distance they'd practiced to draw Marcus into optimal position. She helped you target other girls? didn't she? That's why she wanted me to watch you together. She wanted me to learn to be like her. Victoria understands the natural order of things. Marcus moved forward, following Emily's retreat. The world is divided into predators and prey, sweetheart. Your father's military code, his precious honor, that's for the weak. The strong take what they want. And what do you want, Marcus? The question hung in the air like smoke before a firefight. John watched through his scope as Marcus's predatory smile widened. Smart question. What I want, Emily, is to finish what your mother and I started. To show you what real power feels like. And if your father tries to interfere, Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Emily the screen. Well, I have enough evidence to destroy his career, his reputation, everything he thinks makes him strong. You really don't understand my father at all, do you? Something in Emily's tone made Marcus pause. What do you mean? You think gathering dirt on people makes you powerful. That blackmail and manipulation make you strong. Emily's voice carried clearly through John's earpiece. But my father? He's faced real enemies, fought real battles. What you do? It's just sophisticated cowardice. The words, John's own words from his confrontation with Victoria, hit Marcus like a physical blow. His predatory composure cracked. You little bitch, he snarled, lunging forward. You're just like him, aren't you? Think you're better than me? Better than your mother. Now. John's command was barely a whisper. The warehouse exploded with light as military-grade flashbangs detonated in precisely calculated positions. Marcus staggered, disoriented, as Emily executed the evasion maneuver they'd practiced. 3 steps back, pivot, drop. John was already moving, his years of close-quarters combat training taking over. Marcus was half-blind, reaching for where Emily had been, when John's first strike took him in the solar plexus. Security teams, hold position, Riley's voice crackled. Colonel Carter has engaged the target. Marcus swung blindly, his expensive suit jacket tearing as John deflected the blow. You think this changes anything? He gasped. I own this town. One phone call. You're still thinking like a predator. John's voice was cold as he systematically dismantled Marcus's defenses. Still believing your social power means something in a real fight. A wild punch from Marcus met empty air as John stepped inside his guard. The sound of ribs cracking was oddly satisfying. The photos, Marcus wheezed, are in FBI custody, along with your entire operation. John caught Marcus's arm, using the man's own momentum to slam him into a concrete pillar. Victoria's already confessed everything. Your hunting grounds are burned. You can't prove. I'm not here to prove anything. John's next strike dropped Marcus to his knees. I'm here to teach you what happens when you target a warrior's daughter. Marcus tried to reach into his jacket. John caught the glint of metal, a small pistol, exactly where Emily had said he kept it. Really? John's laugh was arctic. You bring a gun to distract from the fact that you're what? A middle-aged tennis coach who gets his kicks terrorizing teenage girls? The pistol clattered away as John disarmed him with clinical precision. Marcus's facade of sophisticated menace had crumbled, leaving only the coward beneath. She's mine. Marcus spat blood. Victoria promised. We had a deal. No. John's voice was death itself. She's my daughter, and you're about to learn why predators fear warriors. The sound of Marcus's arm breaking was very, very final. The sound of approaching sirens filled the warehouse as John knelt beside Emily, who had maintained her tactical position throughout the confrontation. Her hands were steady as she reached for him, showing more strength than fear. You okay, soldier? John asked softly, checking her for any injuries. I'm fine, Dad. I kept to the plan, just like we practiced. Emily's voice held a new confidence. Did you see how he broke when I used Mom's own tactics against him? All that talk about power, but he couldn't handle being the prey instead of the predator. Federal agents swarmed into the building, securing Marcus, who lay groaning on the concrete floor. Agent Phillips approached, taking in the scene with professional assessment. Quite an operation, Colonel Carter. Phillips nodded. Your daughter's performance was crucial to the setup. Those text messages led us right to his phone's location. Emily did more than that, John said proudly. She recognized his psychological warfare tactics and turned them against him. That's not something you can teach. That's pure tactical intuition. Marcus's voice, weak but still venomous, carried across the space. You think this is over? I still have contacts, files your FBI lapdogs haven't found. You mean these? Emily pulled out her phone, showing a screen full of downloaded files. While you were monologuing about power and control, I was downloading everything from your cloud storage. The password wasn't hard to crack. Kingmaker 2024? Really? Mom always said your ego would be your downfall. The color drained from Marcus's face as Agent Phillips took the phone. That's inadmissible. You can't. Actually, we can. Phillips smiled grimly. Your kidnapping attempt gave us probable cause. Everything on that cloud drive is now evidence. Including, he scrolled through the files, well, looks like you kept trophies from your previous hunting grounds. Very thorough records, Mr. Vale. Or should I say, Mr. Vincent? Mr. Prescott? I want my lawyer, Marcus growled. Of course you do. John helped Emily to her feet. But your usual legal team might be compromised considering what's in those files. Amazing how quickly power structures collapse when they're built on blackmail. Major Riley appeared from the shadows, his tactical team securing the perimeter. Federal transport's here for him. And Colonel, you need to hear this. Riley held out his phone, playing a recorded message from the federal holding facility. Victoria's voice, breaking with rage. You promised me protection, she screamed at someone. You said your files would keep us safe. But you never planned to protect me, did you, Marcus? I was just another one of your tools, another stupid woman you used to get to teenage girls. Turn it off, Emily said quietly. I don't need to hear any more. John studied his daughter's face, seeing past the lingering fear to the steel underneath. You sure? It's okay to want answers from her. I already have my answers, Dad. Mom chose power over love, control over family. She helped a predator target other girls, other daughters. There's nothing else I need to know. As federal agents led Marcus away, he made one last attempt to regain control. Emily, tell them about the tennis lessons, about how you came to me willingly. You mean the lessons that never happened? Emily's voice carried clearly through the warehouse. The ones Mom lied about in those fake texts you planted? Here's something you and Mom never understood. Lying about something doesn't make it true. It just makes you a liar. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You're just like your father. All that self-righteous. Thank you. Emily cut him off. Being like my father is the highest compliment you could give me. He's everything you pretend to be, strong, powerful, in control. The difference is he uses his strength to protect people. You use yours to hurt them. John felt something in his chest tighten with pride as Emily turned her back on Marcus, dismissing him as completely as any veteran soldier dismissing a defeated enemy. Agent Phillips? Emily's voice was steady. I'm ready to make my formal statement now. About everything. Mom's involvement, the psychological manipulation, the attempts to isolate me from Dad. All of it. Phillips nodded respectfully. Of course. And Emily? That was some impressive tactical work tonight. You've got your father's instincts. As they walked toward the waiting federal vehicles, Emily leaned against John's side. Did you see his face when he realized he'd lost control? When he understood that his whole power structure was built on lies? You did that, John said quietly. You saw through his tactical weakness, his need to brag, to prove his dominance. Classic predator behavior. I had a good teacher. Emily managed a small smile. All those emergency drills, the tactical training you disguised as games when I was little. You were preparing me, weren't you? Teaching me to think like a warrior instead of a victim. I was teaching you to survive. John helped her into one of the federal SUVs. Your mother, she wanted to teach you to be a predator. I wanted to teach you to be strong without being cruel. There's a difference between power and strength, between control and discipline. I understand that now. Emily's voice held conviction. Mom and Marcus, they thought gathering dirt on people made them powerful. But real power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself, about using your strength to protect instead of harm. As they drove through the night toward the federal building where Emily would make her statement, John watched his daughter's reflection in the window. The scared, withdrawn girl of a few months ago was gone, replaced by someone who had faced her own predators and emerged stronger. Dad. Emily's voice was thoughtful. Do you think Mom really believed in what she was doing? That she was teaching me some kind of twisted life lesson? Your mother lost her way long before Marcus, John said carefully. She confused power with cruelty, strength with dominance. By the time she met him, she was ready to believe that his predatory behavior was somehow enlightened, that helping him target vulnerable girls made her powerful instead of complicit. Will you ever forgive her? No. John's voice was final. Some choices can't be unmade. Some lines can't be uncrossed. She didn't just betray our marriage. She betrayed her duty as a mother, as a human being. She helped a predator target children, including her own daughter. That's not something that gets forgiveness. Emily nodded slowly. I understand. And honestly, I don't want to forgive her either. Not after seeing those files, realizing how many other girls she helped him isolate and manipulate. She wasn't just his victim. She was his spotter, his recruiter. You're allowed to mourn who you thought she was, John said gently. The mother you remembered from before. That's just it. I'm not sure that mother ever really existed. Maybe this is who she always was, and we just couldn't see it. Emily's hand found his. But I got lucky. I got a father who taught me the difference between being strong and being cruel. As the federal building loomed ahead, John squeezed his daughter's hand. They had survived the battle, outmaneuvered the predators who had targeted their family. Now came the harder part. Rebuilding, healing, moving forward, but they would do it together, as they had faced everything else. Not as predator and prey, but as warriors who had faced their enemies and emerged victorious. Victoria and Marcus had thought themselves masters of power and control. Instead, they had learned the oldest lesson in warfare. That true strength lies not in the ability to harm, but in the choice to protect. 3 months after the warehouse confrontation, John stood in the federal courthouse corridor, watching Emily adjust her blazer before taking the stand. The preliminary hearings had revealed the full scope of Marcus's operation. Dozens of victims across multiple states, a network of enablers like Victoria, who helped him identify and isolate vulnerable teenagers. You ready for this? John asked, noting how his daughter's hands remained steady despite the pressure. I'm ready. Emily's voice carried the quiet confidence she'd developed since that night. The other girls need to know they're not alone, that someone fought back and won. Inside the courtroom, Marcus sat between his lawyers, his expensive suit unable to hide how small he looked without his predatory power. Victoria sat separately with her own legal team, her perfectly maintained appearance a stark contrast to the defeat in her eyes that as Emily took the stand, John watched his ex-wife flinch at the strength in their daughter's voice. The scared, withdrawn girl Victoria had tried to manipulate was gone, replaced by a young woman who understood the difference between power and strength. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Emily Carter. And could you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, Marcus Vale? Emily's eyes met Marcus's, unflinching. He was my mother's lover. She brought him into our lives as part of their plan to, in their words, teach me about power and control. Could you elaborate on that plan? My mother, Victoria Carter, helped Marcus identify and isolate vulnerable girls through her social connections. She would gain their trust, learn their weaknesses, then help him exploit those weaknesses. Emily's voice remained steady. In my case, she forced me to watch their encounters, telling me I needed to learn how to manipulate men the way she did. Victoria's lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about my client's motivations. No, I'm quoting her directly. Emily cut in. I have the text messages where she spelled out their plans. They're part of the evidence package, along with the files I downloaded from Marcus's cloud storage that night. The judge overruled the objection, and Emily continued, detailing months of psychological warfare. She described how Victoria and Marcus had worked together to break down her confidence, to isolate her from her father, to create a paper trail of fake tennis lessons and manufactured encounters. And what made you finally tell your father what was happening? Emily's eyes found John's. I remembered something he taught me during our emergency drills. that predators rely on isolation, on making their targets feel alone and powerless. The day I finally told him was the day I stopped being a target and became a warrior. Marcus's lawyer tried to challenge her testimony, to paint her as a confused teenager misinterpreting innocent situations. Emily dismantled each attempt with tactical precision. You claim my client was inappropriate, and yet you continued to attend private tennis lessons. There were no tennis lessons, Emily replied calmly. Check the country club records. The times Mom claimed I was having lessons, Marcus was actually with her. They created a false narrative to explain why he was around me so often. Classic predator technique. Establishing a legitimate seeming reason for access to targets. And these so-called emergency drills your father taught you were the reason I survived. Emily's voice carried through the courtroom. While you were studying law, my father studied tactical warfare. He taught me to think like a warrior instead of a victim. That's how I helped the FBI trap your client, by using his own predatory tactics against him. The cross-examination continued, but Emily never wavered. John watched Victoria's composure crack as their daughter methodically exposed every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to corrupt her into becoming another predator like them. During a recess, Agent Phillips approached John in the corridor. Your daughter's testimony is devastating their defense. Marcus's other victims are coming forward, inspired by her strength. She's not just strong, John replied. She's tactical. Every answer targets their psychological warfare strategy, exposes their methodology. Like father, like daughter. Phillips smiled grimly. Victoria's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. Seems your ex-wife doesn't like being on the receiving end of exposure. John watched Emily talking with other witnesses, young women who had survived Marcus's predation, who were finding their own warrior spirits. Let her plea. Emily's testimony isn't about punishment anymore. It's about showing other targets they can fight back. The trial proceeded for another week, with Emily's testimony forming the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Marcus's carefully constructed empire of manipulation crumbled as victim after victim came forward, emboldened by the example of a teenager who had turned a predator's tactics against him. Victoria accepted a plea deal, trading a reduced sentence for detailed testimony about Marcus's operation. When she tried to speak to Emily during another recess, her daughter's response was pure tactical precision. Save your manipulations, Mom. You chose to be a spotter to help him target girls like me. Any mother who helps a predator hunt children isn't a mother at all. The day the verdict came down, John and Emily stood together as Marcus was led away to begin his sentence. Victoria, already in custody under her plea agreement, watched them with desperate eyes. Emily, please, she called out. I did it for you, to make you strong. No, Emily's voice was steel. You did it for yourself because you mistake cruelty for strength. Dad taught me what real strength looks like. It's about protecting others, not exploiting them. Outside the courthouse, Emily paused on the steps, looking out over the city. It's really over, isn't it? This battle is, John agreed. But you've started something bigger. Those other girls, the ones coming forward now, they're learning what you learned. That being a target doesn't mean staying a victim. We should help them, Emily said thoughtfully. Create some kind of support network. Teach them the tactical awareness you taught me. Turn more targets into warriors. John felt pride swell in his chest. His daughter had faced psychological warfare and emerged not just survived but transformed. Victoria and Marcus had tried to make her a predator like them. Instead, they had forged a protector. Dad, Emily's voice held new purpose. Remember what you said about some choices being unforgivable? I do. I've been thinking about that. Mom and Marcus won't get forgiveness, but maybe we can give their victims something better, the strength to fight back, to protect others. John nodded slowly. From prey to protector. That's a tactical evolution I can support. As they walked to the car, John reflected on how far they'd come from that first morning when he'd noticed Emily's fear. Victoria and Marcus had thought themselves masters of power, experts in control. They had never understood that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about standing between predators and their prey. They had tried to corrupt his daughter's soul, to turn her into another link in their chain of exploitation. Instead, they had helped forge something far more powerful. A warrior who understood that real strength lay not in the ability to hurt, but in the choice to protect. The war for Emily's soul was over. The predators were caged, their hunting grounds destroyed. And in their place stood something they had never counted on. A father and daughter united not by blood alone, but by the warrior's code. They shared some battles left scars, but these scars had purpose. They were reminders that every predator eventually met their match. That for every hunter who sought to harm the innocent, there were warriors ready to stand in their way, and in the end, that was the only power that truly mattered.